Good afternoon, and welcome everyone. My name is Alan Hancock, and I'm the Communications Director for the Coastal Conservation League. First of all, happy World Oceans Day. World Oceans Day was first celebrated in 1992 to recognize the major role that oceans play in everyday life, to raise awareness of the human impacts on our oceans, and to promote sustainable management of the world's oceans. This year's theme is life and livelihoods. And I think we all realize that life in South Carolina wouldn't quite be the same without the Atlantic Ocean. I'm pleased to introduce our staff who will be speaking about current and future opportunities to protect the north coast of South Carolina's ecological and natural resources. It's our goal that our conservation efforts benefit the quality of life for the residents of Georgetown, Horry, Marion, Williamsburg, and Florence counties. Our first speaker this afternoon is Ricky Parker, the Senior Program Director for Legal and Program Support with the Coastal Conservation League. After Ricky, you'll be hearing from Becky Ryon, our brand new North Coast Office Director. And if you have any questions throughout this webinar, please send them through the Q&A tab at the bottom of your Zoom screen. We've got folks monitoring that Q&A, and we'll kick those to Ricky and Becky later in the presentation. We'll have some time at the end to answer those questions. So let's get started. I'll turn it over to you, Ricky.
Thank you, Alan, and thank you everyone for joining us over what I imagine is some of your lunch breaks. We appreciate you spending your afternoon with us and for getting to know Becky a little bit. As Alan said, my name is Ricky Parker, and I recently rejoined the Coastal Conservation League team. Over the past 6 years, I have served in many different capacities with the league, but I have recently rejoined the staff and, as Alan said, serve as the Senior Program Director for Legal and Program Support. And in that role, I serve as a resource for both the North Coast office and our South Coast office, which is based in Beaufort. So the threats in these regions are very real and very great. And there is also great opportunity in those regions. And there's a lot of similarities. So I'm really excited to be part of that work and be part of crafting the solutions to the problems that the regions are facing. So first, I want to say that I was delighted to see that Nancy Cave and Erin Pate are both here today. For those of you who are familiar with our North Coast work, you undoubtedly know one or both of these women. They have really guided our work in this region for the entire time previous to Becky arriving, and I am so thankful that they're here today and very thankful for their watchful eyes in the region. So today I really want to talk a little bit about the Conservation League's history, where we started and where we're going, and also our work in the North Coast. So some of you may be familiar with our roots and our founding by Dana Beach in 1989, but many of you may be new to us or unfamiliar with our first forays into the North Coast region. So just weeks after our organization was formed, Hurricane Hugo hit, and it decimated the Charleston region as well as the nearby Francis Marion Forest. But Hurricane Hugo was something of a blessing in disguise for the forest, at least. The storm knocked out more timber in a single day than had been harvested during the entire previous decade. Prior to Hugo, the forest was comprised primarily of loblolly pine, and this is a species of pine that y'all are likely familiar with. It grows very quickly, it's a prolific cedar, and it had quickly overrun the longleaf pine that had previously dominated the forest. But in the year following Hugo, over 450,000 board feet of lumber were removed from the forest, and you can compare that to 44,000 board feet the year prior. So although this natural disaster had catastrophic impacts on endangered red-cockaded woodpeckers, fox squirrels, and turkey, it also provided an opportunity for the forest to reset and also for the Forest Service to set a course forward that would promote the reestablishment of the hardwood pine dominated by longleaf. As we know now, Longleaf pine thrives on hot growing season fires, but in 1989, we didn't necessarily know that, or at least that knowledge was not spread widely in South Carolina. So our founder, Dana Beach, and Jane LaRoe learned everything that they could about this method of forest management. They even traveled to Georgia to meet with Leon Neal, who shared his expertise on using fire to manage pine forests. Dane and Jane invited Leon to share his knowledge throughout coastal South Carolina, kind of going on this controlled burn roadshow, if you will. And interestingly, one of the first properties to adopt Leon's techniques was Hasty Point in Plantersville. By 2010, after having adopted these forest management practices, Hasty Point had one of the most diverse stands of pine forest on the PD. And of course, that property has now been absorbed by the Wagman Wildlife Refuge, which is a really cool outcome for that property. Over the coming years following Hurricane Hugo, the conservation community worked hand in hand with the Forest Service, and eventually the Francis Marion adopted an incredibly progressive forage management plan, and they set aside 55,000 acres for longleaf pine restoration. Now management through fire has been adopted broadly in South Carolina, including at places like Lewis Ocean Bay in Horry County. But as we know all too well, development pressures near these incredible habitats sometimes makes burning difficult. In the case of the Francis Marion, the League was successful in getting rural zoning categories adopted near that area that kind of lessen that development pressure. But in other parts of our coast, that's not necessarily the case. And we know that very well in Horry County, where Conway Medical Center intends to build a hospital facility directly across International Drive from Lewis Ocean Bay, a property which is managed by DNR. Becky has already really immersed herself in that project, and you'll learn more about the project and how you can support DNR and Lewis Ocean Bay when you hear from her momentarily. But of course, our work is not limited to protecting habitats in the Charleston region or evangelizing about controlled burn as a longleaf pine management system. Our first project in the North Coast region kicked off with a proposal to construct a bridge to the north end of Sandy Island in 1993. So the League was still a baby organization, just 4 years old at that point, but Dana recognized that bridging this island almost certainly meant inviting resorts and condominiums onto this special piece of property. Islanders, who called Sandy Island home and were largely the descendants of slaves, own about 200 acres of that island, and the remaining portion, about 12,000 acres, was owned by a timber company. And at approximately the size of Hilton Head Island, the story would be an all too familiar one for South Carolina's coast, a story of developers moving onto a special property, elbowing out Black landowners and creating this situation where Black owners were isolated into small pockets. And Emory Campbell, who was the executive director of the Penn Center on St. Helena at the time, and who lives on Hilton Head to this day, was really the expert in telling that story. And so he was invited to Sandy Island to tell the story of how bridging an island can be massively destructive for generational Black landowners. In the meantime, the Conservation League, who was represented by David Farron of the Southern Environmental Law Center, and island residents who were represented by Trenham Walker, opposed state permits for the road vigorously and were able to hold up the project. Over time, the landowners who owned the 12,000 acre portion of the island softened to the idea of selling the property, and eventually DOT, the Department of Transportation, purchased the property using it as mitigation for a local road project. And the department also picked up 7,700 acres of cypress tupelo swamp in the region. That property, along with a small portion of Sandy Island, eventually became the Wagman Wildlife Refuge, which has now also absorbed Hasty Point. Protecting properties in this area has slowed down the progress of damaging transportation projects that would have cut through these regions, but many of them still pose a threat today, and their names will be very familiar to you: the Southern Evacuation Lifeline and I-73. Just last week, Horry County requested $150 million from the federal government to build the CEL project. They also requested $15 million to obtain right-of-way acquisitions for I-73. And so these are threats that exist today. We are currently litigating I-73, challenging their federal permits for that project and asking that they conduct a new environmental impact statement. But these projects are still at the top of our list and still things that Becky will be spending a good deal of her time working on in the coming years, and hopefully not decades, but perhaps decades. We've also expanded our mission substantially and the types of projects that we work on in the past several years since Laura Cantrell has taken the reins. She's our new executive director. I say new, but she's now been here for about 3 years. And we now have worked on projects like reducing the amount of plastic pollution in the environment, creating safe ways for folks who rely on bikes and pedestrians to get to work and to essential services, and also to combat flooding and sea level rise. So with all of that work on the table, that is the reason that we have invested in the North Coast region and have hired an incredibly capable and motivated office director in Becky Ryon, who I am delighted to introduce you to now. Becky will tell you more about herself momentarily, but she's been on the ground for nearly a month. She's starting to settle in, and she's really anxious to meet you all and hear your concerns about the region. So with that, I will turn you over to Becky. Again, if you have any questions for me or for Becky as this event moves forward, please type them into the Q&A box. We'll be happy to answer them after Becky's remarks. So with that, I will hand you over to Becky.
Thank you, Alan, for the introduction, and Ricky for that excellent presentation. It's great to meet everyone, and I really hope that we can do it in person soon. I'm currently working remotely from North Carolina, but I hope to be moved down to the North Coast very soon. I just submitted an application for a condo yesterday, so fingers crossed. To give you a little background on me, I grew up in Pasco County, Florida, between the pristine beaches of Clearwater and the manatees in Homosassa Springs, if you're familiar with the geography of Florida on the central west coast in that area. My family moved to the Charlotte area when I was 16, and I went to the University of North Carolina, the real Carolina, go Tar Heels, to study anthropology, and started my career as a field organizer and a campaign manager in electoral politics, mostly in Charlotte, but I did do a brief stint for a special election for the South Carolina 1st Congressional District, knocking doors in Goose Creek and Monk's Corner. In 2016, I joined the Virginia League of Conservation Voters as a regional field director to oversee the newly formed Climate Action Program in Richmond, which built grassroots support for clean energy and environmental issues like the safe disposal of coal ash, establishing a clean car standard for electric vehicles, and promoting legislation to study the impacts of gold mining. Another project that might strike a chord for you, the fight against a proposed Wagman's distribution center in Hanover County, just north of Richmond. So Wagman's is a grocery store chain from New York that's been moving down into Virginia and North Carolina. And this distribution center would help with their expansion efforts, but it would also be in the middle of a historic freedmen's community, Brown Grove, which was founded by a formerly enslaved woman in 1870, and her descendants still live there today. Brown Grove has faced a number of destructive developments in the past, first being bisected by I-95, then having 5 other industrial sites move in, such as a construction debris landfill and an air park. The distribution center would be literally in the backyards of 11 houses, the size of the Pentagon, 6 stories tall, and have as many as 2,800 tractor trailers going in and out 24/7. So there are environmental justice concerns over the air quality from those truck emissions, as well as potential impacts on their water. A lot of the houses are still on well water. In addition to all of this, the site also has at least 15 acres of wetlands that are part of the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So we were working with the Brown Grove community to encourage Wegmans to choose another site in Hanover and to oppose permits from the State Water Control Board and the Army Corps of Engineers, processes that are likely very familiar to you. Unfortunately, I've been learning about similar situations in the North Coast of poorly conceived sites for development. In fact, as Ricky mentioned, one of the projects I'm already working on is to oppose the Conway Medical Center development in Carolina Forest. It would be across International Drive from Lewis Ocean Bay Heritage Preserve, which is home to many endangered and threatened wildlife, including one of the few remaining sites in South Carolina for black bears, red cockaded woodpeckers, and Venus flytraps. The Department of Natural Resources manages the preserve and conducts prescribed burns in order to nourish the land and create the necessary conditions for the fly traps by clearing out the scrub and creating the right combination of sandy soil and ash that the fly traps need to seed and germinate. And then also having the controlled burns there helps to cut down on the risk of wildfires. But placing a medical facility directly across from Lewis Ocean Bay and where they do the controlled burns makes no sense. Conway Medical Center said they'll add filters to clear the air inside the facility, but I can only imagine that having smoke in the air as people are walking in and out of the facility would, harm anybody that has respiratory issues. We submitted comments at the June 1st Horry County Council meeting, but the rezoning, the future land use amendment, and the development agreement passed the first reading. We're expecting that the second reading and then a public hearing will be at the next meeting on June 15th. And so we're asking everybody to submit written comments, or even better, if you're able to sign up to speak in opposition to the development. Even if you're not comfortable with public speaking, there's still a role for you to play. We'd love folks to just show up and stand when the council members ask how many in the audience are opposed to the project. There's also a community meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the Carolina Forest Recreation Center for the public to learn more about the development agreement. This is the second just community meeting that they've done. It will also likely be live streamed on the Horry County Planning and Zoning Facebook page. So from the hospital development and then hearing about fires at the Starrett Swamp landfill from Amelia Wood, to the mining, the flooding, and the traffic, there's a lot to do in the North Coast. And a common frustration within the community seems to be that new development is outpacing infrastructure. New housing is going up without the necessary improvements to roads, mass transit, stormwater management, schools, etc. So we need flood ordinances to raise building levels, tree ordinances to protect the canopy, and regulations to protect our air and the watersheds that make the region so unique and precious. But I want our work for the North Coast to be proactive, not just reactive and hopping around to put out both the figurative and literal fires. I also would love to hear from you what your top concerns are for the region. So we have a poll that we'd love everyone to take right now, and I'll give you all a minute to answer with just which issue you think is the most important or the most pressing for the area. I know, you probably care about a lot of these, but just to get a sense of where your top priorities are. And then if you have something else that you'd like to have us work on, feel free to type it in the chat or add it in the Q&A box. I just would love to hear from folks in the North Coast where your priorities lie. Let's give it a few more seconds. Okay, so protecting wildlife and natural resources, definitely agree with that. Sea level rise and flooding, also very important, and traffic, that makes a lot of sense, and water quality. That really resonates. So thank you all for sharing your feedback. If there is one point to take away from our meeting today, besides you all getting to know me and hear about some of the work that's already been done in the North Coast and what we're currently working on and ways to get involved, conserving our natural resources in the North Coast is going to be a long game effort, and the job is never going to be complete. But we as a community of residents, advocates, conservationists, and everyone in between need to work together to preserve and celebrate places like the Lewis Ocean Bay Heritage Preserve and the Wagman National Wildlife Refuge. Collectively, we can all work together to balance growth with protecting our wetlands, beaches, and homes for the benefit of both humans and nature. But we will need your support and voices along the way. And this is a vision that you would like to see become reality. We hope that you will join our efforts in the North Coast. So we have a few minutes left. If you'd like to submit some questions, we'd be happy to answer them, and feel free to continue to submit questions. We already have one that I see. So Ricky, it looks like you wanted to answer that question. So I'll pass it over to you.
Well, I thought it was a really great question. And it's that land planning is critical to all issues in the North Coast. What activities will focus on this? And I think one of the most immediate and pressing projects that Becky and I have planned to work on is that Georgetown is in the process of updating their comprehensive plan. They have proposed a land use section of their comp plan that encountered some public resistance. And so they're kind of back to the drawing board. And so one thing that we want to get engaged in immediately is helping to provide feedback to the Georgetown planning staff on that comprehensive plan, and especially that land use element. We've had some initial conversations with their planning director, and those have been really promising. So certainly that's one avenue that we intend to pursue, but understand that the region is much larger than that, and we may need to be more creative about how we approach land use issues in Horry County, given that they just updated their comprehensive plan. So I think just keeping a watchful eye on those comp plan amendments, which I understand are already coming fast and furious, even though they just updated their comprehensive plan. So we'll be watching that as well. And of course, Nancy, if you have other ideas on how to get more engaged in the land use conversation in Georgetown and Horry especially, we would love to set up a time to chat with you and get those thoughts too.
I was on mute. And Nancy, you had another question about the community meeting in Carolina Forest tomorrow. So that is put on by the planning department with Horry County. And then we are certainly in contact with a number of organizations and local advocates who are opposing the Conway Medical Facility. And we're looking to try to build up an organized effort to oppose it on the 15th. So we have been already in contact with the Waccamaw Riverkeeper, Kara, and then have reached out to some other folks, individuals mostly, but like I said, she's been a great resource with the Upper Waccamaw Task Force, the members of that group that would like to work to oppose the Conway Medical Facility. But anyone who is interested, please feel free to reach out to me, and then please do sign up for the meeting on the 15th. You can do so through the county council's clerk, Pat Hartley. Yes, Pat Hartley. Her email address is listed there, hartleyp@horrycounty.org. And so you can either submit comments, written comments that way, or you can sign up to speak. We expect that each of the three pieces that I mentioned, the rezoning, the future land use amendment, and the development agreement, will all have separate public hearings. And so generally speaking, they take 3 speakers against and 3 speakers for. So that gives us only a total of 9 speaking spots available for that particular issue. And then also, the flood ordinance for Horry County should be on its second reading and have public hearing as well. And so we will be submitting comments in support of that. That is a great step forward to address the flooding issues in Horry County. And Horry County Rising is certainly taking a lead on that particular topic.
And I'll just add quickly that, one thing that has been really unfortunate about the Conway Medical Center project is that those of you who know our work in the North Coast, and Nancy, are certainly the person who knows this best, will recall our opposition to International Drive. And part of the reason that we opposed International Drive's widening and paving was that we knew that this would increase development pressure in the area. And I was just on a call with Amy Armstrong at the South Carolina Environmental Law Project, who, you know, conveyed kind of my thoughts on the project pretty succinctly, which is, you know, we told you so. This is, you know, the outcome when you take actions like that. And, you know, we're now seeing that development pressure really creep out on International Drive, and it's unfortunate. But we're going to do the best we can to protect the important natural resources out there at Lewis Ocean Bay. And also, one thing that we haven't mentioned is that Horry County plans to operate a mitigation bank out there, and DNR was supposed to take ownership of that bank and manage it through controlled burns and things like that. And they are now saying that they may not take over that mitigation bank because of the development of the Conway Medical Center parcel. So that's another reason for us to oppose this project, and for Horry County to be really leery of this project. If they want to do road development in the county, they're going to need access to that mitigation bank. And so that's another little point to keep in mind if you do plan on writing comments or attending the meeting in person. So just wanted to add a little bit to that Conway Medical Center conversation. And Becky, I think there was another question for you, and I'm happy to take the question about our office space too.
Okay, great. Yeah, so where am I going to live? That is an excellent question. The housing and the rental market is very challenging right now. I think for a number of different reasons. Coming out of the pandemic, a lot of people are moving to the beach because they can work remotely. So it has been a fun and challenging activity to try to find a place to live. Like I said, I submitted an application yesterday for a condo. It would be in Murrells Inlet on the Horry County side, so back by the Blackmore golf course. So I'm trying to be very central for the region to be able to get easily to Georgetown and to North Myrtle Beach, and then inland to Florence or Marion or Williamsburg counties. So that was my goal, but it has been a very frustrating process, honestly. But as Ricky, you wanted to answer the question about the office?
Yeah, I'm happy to. I think that our office space is still kind of to be determined. I think we definitely want to have a physical office space once everything opens up fully. But it's kind of to be determined where that office space might be. We would like something that's kind of centrally located to the region. And so we'll be looking for that in the coming months, and maybe certainly within the next year. So more to come on our physical office location, but know that that is something that we do want to pursue, and we want to have a physical location for folks to be able to drop by and visit us.
And then there's another question about staff in the North Coast. So very exciting time. We are actually hiring a project manager to join me in the North Coast. We've been in the interview process and are currently still interviewing a number of very qualified candidates, and hopefully we'll have a new announcement for you coming soon. I can't give you an exact timeline, but hopefully in the next little bit, we'll be able to announce a project manager to join me in the North Coast to match the number of staff that the South Coast has, and to really show our commitment to the North Coast region.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy, for your question about DNR's opposition to the Conway Medical Center. They have submitted comments opposing the project and indicating their concerns about being able to manage at Lewis Ocean Bay using fire, given a hospital locating next door. You know, I can't imagine that would be of all the land uses, it seems like one of the most problematic, honestly. And they have also used that pressure with the mitigation bank to the extent that they feel comfortable, I think. So our goal really is to elevate DNR's voice through this process, because they have, you know, some political constraints, right? So our goal is to really elevate those concerns and provide as much pushback to County Council on June 15th as we possibly can.
Thank you, Nancy. We would certainly welcome the opportunity to talk with you as well. I've heard a lot about you, and I don't know that anyone knows the North Coast and the Coastal Conservation League's work in the North Coast as well as you do. So I definitely welcome the opportunity to speak with you, and hopefully we can do so in person soon, or if not in person, at least virtually. Ricky is going to be visiting the North Coast at least quarterly. So hopefully there will be a time that matches up for everyone, but would love to pick your brain on all of the issues that the North Coast has faced over the last decade or so. So thank you for that offer, and we will certainly take you up on it.
I resisted the urge, Nancy, to include the infamous picture of you and Dana lying in the middle of the road. So would love to meet up, and if nothing else, Becky would benefit from hearing your stories about the initial days at the Conservation League, for sure.
Well, thank you, everyone. If there are no other questions, we'll let you go, but please do keep an ear out for the action alert coming out around the June 15th Horry County Council meeting. If you're not already signed up for emails, please do so. I plan to send out a monthly newsletter, so keep an eye out for that. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me via email or phone. I would love to hear from you all. And like I said before, I hope to meet you all in person very shortly.